Welcome to the CDM 2015 Back to Basics 2, and talking about the Commonwealth Games 2022 with Ben Crabb. We'll just quickly go through the Chiltern branch updates and a few other bits of information, and then I'll hand over to Ben Crabb, and we'll tell us all about how amazing the Commonwealth Games was and the complicated CDM elements that went into that as well. So just a reminder of all our branch communications. The microsite, our YouTube page, LinkedIn, which is our main hub for where we put our information, events, and where you can see all the different IOSH committee members. And then I'm trying to think of the other ones. We've got Twitter as well, for those that are signed up into Twitter. I just wanted to quickly show this slide here from Shirley Parsons with some local different jobs and things that they have going on and new ones that may be of interest. The slides and the information will be accessible afterwards anyway, and the email address if you're interested to contact them about that information. Some interesting ones in there. And just to try and remind everyone that how much we want your feedback, and I'm not joking. The amount of conversations we have about your feedback is unreal. We want it, we want to read it, we want to see what it all is. Anything you've got interesting to say, any events you're interested in, how you felt about the speakers or what we were talking about, the quality of the events that are going on, or anything to do with our local branch. If you're a Chiltern branch member, we want to hear about it. And there's an email address to Chiltern branch. Obviously, you can post on LinkedIn page and the live poll questions that will come up. I will stop sharing now and then throw this over. I really need to get better Zoom. That's the button. All right, over to you, Ben.
All right, hopefully you can all hear me and I'm off mute. So yep. Good. That's all. There's a load of thumbs up, so that's always good. Hopefully everyone's not too wet. Up in Lincolnshire where I am at the moment. I'm not in Birmingham. I've been in Lincoln the past few days. To say it's a bit wet is a bit of an understatement. We've got farmers out at the moment towing people out of different areas, and about 5 miles up the road you can't get through. So so hopefully everyone else has coped all right. Fortunately, that bit of weather which has come, it's been a bit of a thankful. Have some wetness on the ground, just make some of the fire risks a bit less. And for us at the games, it was good because we had pretty much a dry 2 weeks and the lead up into the Commonwealth Games, which made sure it was nice and dry and everyone enjoyed themselves and got nice suntans. So just like to say thanks to Kev for inviting me along for this afternoon to come and talk a bit about CDM and some of the complexities which surround CDM in relation to mega events. I call it a mega event because it is a mega event. Just so you get an idea of what my scope was, I got brought in as a health and safety advisor to the Commonwealth Games, and then basically became the deputy head as well, working alongside my colleague Joe Ryan, who was the head of safety. But my role was predominantly to oversee and ensure the CDM compliance for the games across every single build. So when you look at the build phase, when I first got taken on December 2020, and then moving into the January and February, the first things which my remit was to create a CDM strategy for the organisation committee. I'm going to call it OC from this point in. I'm going to send some slides out and bits and pieces, some acronyms. Those of you who may have worked in large events or for military based backgrounds, you'll be used to sort of acronyms, and the whole of any major event, whether it's Olympics, Commonwealth Games, European Games, etc., we operate around 3-letter word acronyms, and so OC is our shortest for Organisation Committee, which refers to Birmingham 2022. And as I was saying, the first thing which I was scoped with creating was the CDM strategy for the Games. Now, the strategy was the most complex and longest document we created at the Games in the suite of safety policies and procedures. The document in the end came in at just under 200 pages, I think it was 197 in total, which set out every single stage and factor of how we will manage CDM. The complexity which surrounds it was the fact in total I had 84 different site builds running simultaneously. In there was also 17 competition venues. And outside that 84 also included offices, training venues, the fleet hubs, the warehouses, uniform and accreditation centres, the villages, etc. as well. So it wasn't just one place. In there also sat the logistic compounds, which sat at Birmingham Airport and also down at Heathrow, bringing people in, a COVID hospital, and then also the testing regimes for doping and anti-doping, etc. as well. So when you look at the series of phases, there was in effect 84 venues which were being built and messed around with, and then we had the major venues as well. So those of you who are involved in CDM, you're probably used to those terminologies: client, principal contractor, principal designer. And in essence, with those terminologies at Birmingham 2022, the organisation committee, the actual Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, we were the clients. And what we did is we spent nearly 18 months, just coming up 2 years, creating the plans and designs as to how we wanted the venues to look and also to flow. Now, with my role, it wasn't just picking up on how the CDM regulations work and how we meet our legal compliance in relation to CDM. We also had to factor in a number of other different regulations to make sure those plans were fit for purpose. So we had things like Sports Ground Safety Act, where we have something called the Green Guide, which applies to every single stadium across the UK. We also had the Purple Guide, which is the regulations which relate to outdoor event spaces. So what we classed as green fields. And our green fields were some of the venues which you may have seen: Smithfield, where beach volleyball was, the basketball, the road races, and they're classed as greenfield pop-up, potentially one-day venues and then shut down, apart from a couple which were there for a while. So the CDM part, from the client perspective, we had more than just the CDM regulations which came into effect and into play from a client perspective. So we spent time designing, which slightly confused and also muddies that wording for principal designer. So although we were doing the design as a client, what we then did is we brought in turnkey suppliers. And the turnkey suppliers, and we used two, we used Arena and we also used GL Events. And they had different venues which they're in charge of building. And as a turnkey supplier, they in effect had a derogation to become the principal designer and also in effect the principal contractor at the same time for those venues. So from a standard sort of CDM perspective, we have client principal designer who does the plans, we agree, make some amendments, and then we pass it to the principal contractor to do the build. Within our process, although we're the client, we created what was originally called the Overlay Book 3.1 or OB 3.1, which is the final design of how we wanted the venues to look. And part of that look, as I was saying earlier, to do with the Green Guide and the Purple Guide, was to make sure we were in compliance with crowd flow, exit capacities, and not just the CDM regs, not just the fire regulations, but also the licensing regulations on the speed of evacuation from those venues as well. So for us in the stadium world and events world, we have an 8-minute evacuation procedure, but it also gets muddied again by the fact we have athletes, we have games family, we may have royal family, etc. on those venues. So we may also need to then change how that design and how that evacuation works. So from the design to the principal designer to the principal contractor, GL and Arena then undertook, in effect, our phase 1 type of build, our main construction builds. So those of you who may have been lucky enough to drive around Birmingham or down to Warwick or as far north as Cannock Chase, you may have seen the structures going up and being built by these turnkey suppliers as principal contractor. So while they're building these structures for us, we attempt to put all of the high risk construction and build processes into this first phase, and we do call it the construction phase. And in that section, all of the high risk activities are undertaken: the temporary works, the excavation works, the working at heights, or the scaffolding. I mean, any of you who may have been lucky enough to go to Alexander Stadium, the seating build in Alexander Stadium alone took 6 months just to build the 2 seating stands in there to give us the capacity of 40,000. So all of that high risk work we put under the turnkey supplier, the principal contractor. Needless to say, as a client, we then also go out and we do some inspections, which is always good from a client perspective. They then have weekly meetings with us to make sure they're meeting their obligations and our obligations to keep us updated. So that regular meetings every week for an hour was vital. Plus, we had liaisons working with them every single day to make sure any information was passed back to us. And we also, as the client, conducted site visits just to check on and make sure people knew who we are and to make sure they were on track and their safety was on track as well. Needless to say, because of the high visibility of the event we were putting together, we were in regular communications with the HSE. The HSE also undertook a series of site visits with their construction specialists because they have vested interest as well as to how we're operating, what some of our processes, and are the turnkeys, in effect, the principal contractors and their subcontractors working correctly and effectively. So that first phase, under the PC, in effect, they've got subcontractors in there. Once we hit what we called substantially complete was the word we used, and we created this phase, substantially complete. And the substantially complete phase was when we deemed that sufficient risk from build had been removed. So there was going to be no more lifting operations, no more working at height, potentially the amount of vehicles moving around site, etc., had reduced. At that point, the site was handed over to us as the OC. So in effect, that's the end of the construction. So the health and safety file, in effect, gets handed over. All the structural inspections get handed over to us as well. All the inspection regime, weather management plans, wind management plans, and then another little thing we have to consider is all the lightning protection and earth continuity, earth bonding for every single structure as well, especially on events such as hockey. You can evacuate certain sections of the stands into the middle so they're protected, but then you need to look where the arc of protection is to determine where hockey players may stay on a pitch. So there's that factors as well from that continuity earth bond and the light protection on the structures as well, which need consideration. So those structures got handed over to us as OC, and then we go into our second phase, which we call bump in. So it's still a CDM phase, but we've deemed that it's no longer under the principal contractor. They've moved off site. We now have the health and safety file, and we then put in our overlay. So all of the nice stuff, all the wrap you probably saw, all that branding which has gone in. The sports presentation comes in, they put up their screens. Sports technology come in, they put in things like the timers, the Hawkeye technology for tracking where balls are going, so you can replay it back and see whether it's in play or out of play. All of that technology gets put in as well. And then we put in things like some of the welfare facilities, and we put in all of our catering, etc. as well, and our hospitality. So our bump-in phase, although it's a condensed period, normally operating under anywhere between 7 days to Edgbaston cricket ground, which was literally 36 hours to bump in all of the stuff which we needed. And then at the end of bump in, we go into live phase. So we come completely out of CDM. We hand the venue from an OC's perspective internally to a department called VMA, venue management. They are the venue managers. So we're out of CDM. There is no CDM undertaking at this point, and we're now in effect a normal event site. We have our security barriers around the outside, and people can come into that venue to enjoy the sport. Once the sport's finished, so this could be a one-day event venue, such as the Warwick Road Race, or out at Wolverhampton for the road race, Sutton Park, where we did 2 days of triathlon, up to Cannock Chase, where we did the mountain biking for a day, or it could be somewhere like Smithfield, where we had a full 9 days of activities, or Alexander Stadium, or even down at the Velodrome. After the period of events have taken place, the sports, we have a closure of 2 hours where nothing happens in effect. We have a full site stoppage of 2 hours once the events have stopped. After the 2 hours, we then go into, in effect, phase 4, which is bump out. Again, it's an OC-driven operation. It's in effect still under CDM, and we're at this precise moment in time the principal contractor, because we're now doing our bump out. So all the video screens are come out, the look starts getting ripped down and comes out. Some of the cameras get taken down, the broadcast stuff, that gets taken down, and that starts to come out under us. Once we've then deemed as what we class as substantially deconstructed, so we have substantially complete where it hands over to us from phase 1. This is substantially deconstructed from our side for the bump out. Where that stops, we then hand back over to the turnkey supplier, who puts the site fully under CDM regulations. And in effect, we don't have a construction phase plan. We use a deconstruction phase plan because whatever we put up now has to come back down. Every single thing we've put in has to come back out. So we now have a phase of deconstruction being run under the principal contractor. That may run from anywhere from some sites which are already finished and handed back 7 days, to somewhere like Alexander Stadium, where the seating's going to come out, where that's going to run until the end of October, until we can say that phase of deconstruction has finished, and then it is handed back to us as the client to say, yes, here's the health and safety file, here's all of the venue returned back in exactly the same state as when we first received it, and then we hand that construction file back to the venue to say, there we go, that is completely closed out. As you can probably see, it's a bit of a logistical nightmare. We have multiple sites running, sometimes in construction and also at bump in. Some of the venues also added more complexity in the fact at the same time as the construction phase and bump in happened simultaneously, we also had it being used as a training venue. Edgbaston Cricket Ground was the prime example. We had to split the site up into effect 3 different sections. And this is sometimes where mega events, the roles can get quite complex, and keeping a track of who's responsible for what and what area is vitally important from those managers who I have, the safety advisors on the ground, feeding back to say, these areas at the moment are under construction, these areas at the moment are under bump in and OC control, and these have been handed back to the venue or still under venue control. Now, to throw an extra layer in there, all of that construction, which I just spoke about, sits inside what we call the red line. The red line is the security line. So anything inside the red line is what we are responsible for. Anything outside the red line normally falls to the local authority and the local council. However, there was one anomaly within the whole of this, and that was our security fencing contractor. So our security fencing contractor, in the end, we decided they will work in effect as their own principal contractor and principal designer. They designed the fence line. They are responsible for the fence line and how it is constructed. So in effect, the red line, while it was being built, the fencing contractors were their own principal contractor in their own right, working alongside the turnkey supplier or us while doing the constructions on the venue. So I've got some slides which I say I'll send out to Kevin to send out to everyone on here. And it hopefully just gives a little bit more of a breakdown of this complexity and how these operations run. And to be honest, I don't know whether any of you on here have been involved in events, but it's something which from my side, coming from a construction background, then working in events for nearly 7 years, the complexity of multiple principal contractors on venues and shutting areas down and saying this area is now under one person and then this area is under someone else, to make sure those lines of communications work can be sometimes quite complex. I know someone's put in the chat there about, specific challenges relating to simultaneous operations. Just to give an idea of contractors, at the height of it, I had 35,500 contractors working on the builds. So to make sure we have communication in place is absolutely vital to make sure that we are all on the same page. We all understand the risks on the sites, and we all have a robust site induction for those venues as well. So that site induction, there was a site induction for every single venue. And some of those venues were under, say, GL Events as one of the turnkey suppliers, and also Arena. So sometimes you had to do 2 different types of site inductions because of the different types of contractors who were running those. And then when the sites were handed to us as the OC, we also had our own site inductions, which every single member of staff and contractor also had to do in order to get a bump in or bump out pass. So the background software which was running this, you can imagine how much data and information is being fed into this, so we can ensure that people have done the inductions, the site specific inductions for every venue they go on, and whether it's also for turnkey specific or when it actually came under us as the OC as well. To answer that question which Jake's put in there in the group, we did have monthly contractor safety integration group meetings. We started off initially with 70 representatives of different contractors. By the time we finished, when we were meeting every single week, we were just up to 200 people attending those meetings weekly. We also had a contractor integration platform where information was also put onto that platform to be accessed by contractors. But this was also a method of contractors submitting all their risk assessments and RAMs and paperwork to the turnkey suppliers, but to us at the OC as well to review, to make sure we were happy with what was being submitted to turnkey suppliers as well, and also to make sure if any of that information changed when those works came under us at the bump in phase. So the complexity around this, I mean, I won't lie, and some of you might smirk, it drove me mad at times because when you're trying to manage that many sites, that many contractors, you needless to say, there are going to be areas where there are failings, where bits fall through the cracks, and this is a massive machine which we put in place to try and prevent this. But we did have occasions where we need to sit down and have a discussion about how different activities were being undertaken, whether that was the right methodologies, and also sometimes were the turnkey's own site safety advisors aware of activities which were going on internally and externally. Now, to throw another layer over the whole of this, every single plan which we submitted also had to go through the local licensing authority through their safety advisory groups. And the reason for that is not only was the complexity around that CDM and the health and safety, but as I said earlier, we had the Sports Ground Safety Act we had to work to, and also the Purple Guide. But then also we have the licensing regulations where it's a sports venue. So we had to make sure that the designs, the build, not only was signed off by building control, but also by the local authority to grant the license so the venue can be used as a sports venue as well. So in order to make sure of that, we had to make sure those lines of communications were there. So not only were we meeting regularly with the turnkey suppliers, the contractors, we also were having regular meetings with the local safety advisory groups, key contacts at Sports Ground Safety Authority as well, and also the HSE Environment Agency, and also key contacts at DCMS, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, to make sure that the venues we were building met every single parts of those regulations. So when it was built, it was fit for purpose, and we could actually put spectators into those venues so people can actually enjoy sport. So that's sometimes where the CDM and the mega events gets more complex for me, because that understanding of those other different regulations, how they impact. So we may turn around and say we have a working at height barrier. The working at height barrier must be 1.1 meters minimum, 950, but depending where that barrier is and where people are sat, we might need to drop it down to 800 mil because people can't see over it due to the calculation we need to put together in the green guide. Or we need to change the width of exits and the size of exits because we can't get people out in X amount of time due to either the purple guide or the green guide. So it's not just the normal regulatory reform fire safety order which affects all this as well, and other aspects within the CDM and health and safety workout. We have all these other regulations which specifically sit around events, which we need to encompass and put in there as well, which sometimes gives a different slew on how the principal designer and principal contractor relationship works as well. So it was good fun, don't get me wrong. I'm glad we put up 17 venues, people came, it filled, and people all left, and that's the most important thing. And at the moment, those builds are coming down. And once they're all signed off, I'll be even happier and can sleep a lot easier. Let's put it that way. So the temporary works, with the amount of temporary works involved in events, how do you manage these works and the systems in place? Temporary works, what a thing that is, isn't it? We did have temporary works logs. Every site, in effect, ran their own log of temporary works which were being undertaken. These fed into a central shared database, so I could actually run a report to find out what temporary works are being carried out, what types of temporary works, have we got certain specific temporary works being undertaken at any one time. The temporary works in effect, depending on what some people's views are in here with CDM, the turnkey suppliers, after discussion, we sat down and all had a little chat, their comment was, in order to meet full robustness, not to let anything be missed, virtually every works which came in, we recorded as temporary works on each site and closed it off as temporary works as well. I'll send you some notes on temporary works, Kev. I know we had a little chat offline the other day about this, and it's something which is close to your heart, probably with other people. What I will do is I'll copy some extracts out of what we put together as a policy for temporary works. And as I say, we pretty much tracked every single one which we classed as temporary work, and we gave a definition what would be classed as temporary works, and every single one was tracked across every single venue, and there still is some temporary works going on as well, and that also fed into some of the enabling works which we conducted prior to taking over the venues as well. Just one little bit in there on the temporary works which some of you may have touched on or may not have touched on is temporary demountable structures, or TDS. Obviously, in the games world or pop-up event world, you know, some of you may put up marquees, you may put up pop-up temporary structures, those pop-up gazebos, bits and pieces. They're all classed as temporary demountable structures. The seating, in effect, is classed as temporary demountable structure. It's a scaffold structure put up, and at the end of it will come back down. However, I'll be completely open and honest about this, and I've been holding off sticking this on LinkedIn to open up a hell of a discussion. We got slightly bitten with temporary demountable structures. So working with the turnkey suppliers who've worked on numerous events in the UK and events I've worked in here in the UK, we suddenly hit a slight anomaly. And the anomaly was some of the structures we put up, we suddenly got approached by building control and said, what are we doing about fire compartmentalization in these structures? And we said, well, they're temporary structures, they'll come down. To which it was pointed out in the document B for building control, if a structure is in place for longer than 28 days, building control takes effect and they must be fire rated. So suddenly we had a significant amount of double story tented structures, which we then had to come up with a solution as to how we would prove those structures will withstand up to 30 minutes of intense fire to prevent collapse and also to enable escape from those structures. We needed a fireboard some. We needed to run laboratory tests on some of the other structures. It's fortunate enough that we had a colleague in, a guy called Martin Bromley, who worked very closely with me. He was our fire safety advisor, and he came in literally 5 weeks before the game started and was hit by this straight away, like, what can we do? Obviously, if we were going to fireboard the structures in place, we were suddenly looking at an additional cost of just over £1 million to fireboard, and God knows where we're going to get that much fireboard in the UK in 4 weeks. So we had to be slightly constructive with how we dealt with those structures. So we did run some tests. We did run laboratory tests on the flooring, the types of materials, and I just noticed someone from Australia pop up. Sorry, and what we came up with in the end was satisfactory with West Midlands Fire Service, and it was also satisfactory with the building control for sign off those structures. Yes, we did have to fireboard one structure quite significantly, and that structure we had to literally shut down overnight, put the boarding in, run the structure in the day, then re-put additional boarding in the following night, including additional fire detection and also a makeshift sprinkler system in there and additional fire extinguishers. And all that was down to was literally the fact that these structures, although everyone was saying it's a temporary structure, it doesn't apply, was this fact, these couple of lines in the document B, which states if it's in place over 28 days, then building regulations apply. And the most important bit was, is which we turned around and said, so the structure's built, but we haven't put anything inside. That doesn't matter. The structure's been complete and it's been signed off by the supplier as being complete. That's the day it starts. So although some of those structures from the date it was completed to coming down, literally it's 6 weeks, but because we went over that 28 days, we had to comply with building control and the building regulations to make sure that we put sufficient fire boarding, etc., into those structures. So it's one just to think about. I will shove something on LinkedIn at some point and spark a massive debate in the events industry as to how this applies. But it's one which I know our principal contractors and our turnkey suppliers have now gone away to think about, because it's not one they come up against before, but they now know that it will do, because local authorities talk, and especially coming out the Commonwealth Games and some of the the legacy reports we'll put together, that certainly will spark some interest and some comments and discussion. Wilson down here, Mitchell's right one. On the side, you have a form process of places that used to be restricted to their own side. Yes, Mitchell. In effect, what we did is we fenced off. We had a significant amount of Harris fencing, and literally any areas where people were working in, we Harris fenced those areas off to say this is our PC or this is under OC. In the sense of the NEC, because we took over the whole of the NEC in Birmingham. Depending who was working in different halls, we shut whole halls off to certain people and basically had almost like a permit on the outside, you know, no entrances under such and such unless you got correct fit out pass and access, authorized access for those areas. So yeah, we did have some significant formal processes. We had fit out passes, which were a specific color for when you were working under the turnkey supplier, and when it was under us, it was a different color. You also had a different coloured sticker to say you'd done those sites and could enter those sites, and they checked your pass and the number to make sure you had actually done the site induction, had authorization to enter those sites as well. So the process and the formal process was very strict because we didn't want those sites as a free-for-all for anyone to turn up on. The other issue we had is obviously building sites. People get excited. They want to go to the sites, have a selfie saying, here I am, look, this is what I'm working on. And we wanted to knock that on the head. So without the formal access, you couldn't go on. You also had to submit 48 hours notification for request for access to those sites. And if we said no, your name wasn't on the list when you turned up that day. Name's not down, you're not coming in effect. And that's how we ran those sites. Okay. Shall we open some comments and discussion, Kev, or?
Yeah, I mean, we can do it. It just seemed really interesting. I mean, I think what everyone wants to hear is all the anomalies, all the complications, all the challenges of working on the Commonwealth Games. We've got one here from Ewan. Yeah, Ewan.
Ewan, yeah. Okay, HC and EA, etc. Local authorities. We set up a joint regulatory group. So they met every month, right from when did we have the first meeting? January 2021, we had our first meeting, and every month we had a monthly 1 or 2 hour meeting with all of those stakeholders, the key stakeholders, HC, EA, Severn Trent to do with water, the local authorities, West Mids Fire, West Mids Ambulance Service, but we also brought in other people in there at different discussions, such as the police as well, where they needed to feed in with things like FIPM, some of the counter-terrorism measures which need to be put into place as well. So the engagement was always key, and then outside of that, we also had a separate group where just the heads and the leads of all the safety advisory groups, they met every single month as well, where we took information from them and we gave them an update of where we were within the games and what our processes were coming, and they could read some of our policies and procedures and what was coming up. And what we found is that open communications helped resolve issues later on down the line. So by having the communications with people like West Mids Fire Service, we could discuss where hydrants were, where fire engines may be parked, what the communications line would be to summons an emergency vehicle to site if there was a fire, how that fire would be dealt with. The same as for the ambulance service of their responses, and also for the police, etc. So all of those stakeholders we did meet with regular, and that, needless to say, as we moved into this year from February, we were literally meeting every other week to make sure that communications was open and we had that two-way flow of information to ensure that everyone was abreast of what was happening, and any concerns, etc., were fed into us as well to make sure. Other anomalies, Christ, there's loads. You know, when you think about what we were putting on, water testing for places like the triathlon. Last thing you want in there is blue-green algae. How else are you going to do it? Another anomaly, the pontoon I don't know how many of you may have watched the triathlon. There was a massive pontoon went out onto the lake there. That whole area, it was a triple SI, a site of special scientific interest. It's a local nature reserve as well. It's not just an ecological triple SI, it's an archaeological triple SI as well. And then to top it off, while the contractors are putting the pontoon out, some kids turned up and nicked the boat and headed off down the lake with it, rowing it. There they were heading off down the lake with the boat. So the pontoon construction got delayed by 24 hours while we went and found the boat. There was a host of different things, such as how do you get accessible people, persons into certain rooms and buildings? Well, have we got enough evac chairs, but they're going to be on the top floor? Well, that's no good. We have to put them on the bottom floors of this building in the villages. They don't have accessible showers. What we're going to do? Well, we're actually going to build pods in there inside the rooms, which are accessible showers. And then at the end of the games, we're going to take those pods out because the university doesn't want the accessible showers. So we put in 84 accessible pod showers for builds as well. We built ramps. You know, if any of you go to Alexander Stadium, there's an accessibility ramp now on the east stand, so people can access the stand properly. And that's you know, part of the legacy, I suppose, of the games, is making sure that these venues, the ones which stay, are still in use afterwards. There were so many different bits which came up, and it's suddenly, how do you deal with this? And sometimes it was thinking outside the box, just sitting down and saying, how can we create a solution? The problem is every single build we had, we were up against it. We had the opening ceremony of the 28th of July. It wasn't going to move. We can't move it, unlike, you know, Qatar, who's moved their opening ceremony by a day, so it suits them. But we could not move that date. It's fixed in stone. The competition schedule is fixed in stone. So anything we did around the city, including the building of the live sites, although it was under a separate length arms organisation, Birmingham Ceremonies and Unboxed, to do those builds, we still had oversight. Every single one of those builds, I can't say there's anything which went up where there wasn't an issue at some point where we had to say, how do we come up with a solution for this? And to me, I think that's what keeps it fresh. That's what keeps the interest. And that's what keeps the excitement and the adrenaline running as well. For a project to work on a project for virtually 2 years of your life for 11 days and then see it come down and gone, you need something there to say why you're doing it. To me, I think the legacy to me is to say we successfully built 17 venues, 84 venues independently, which all ran, and they've all come down, apart from a couple which are still coming down, safely and in the best way possible, to be honest, to make sure we did meet the regulations, and everyone working on them basically came to work and went home safely as well. And that includes all the spectators as well, because everything we built has to be safe for every single spectator coming to those sites. And also Games family. Games family is all the people who come with the athletes, the technical officials, and also the athletes themselves as well. And I think that's a testament to all those 35,500 contractors who worked on the build. Is when you look at what they did and how it looked on the TV, and for those people who went to those venues as well, they were built with safety in mind. It was a games for everyone, and as we said, you know, as safe games for everyone as well. Will safety figures be published compared to previous games? They will be eventually, Joanne. Yes. So we're just working through all of our legacy and transfer knowledge at the moment, and obviously the safety figures will be released. Fortunate to say, at the moment, ours are significantly lower at the moment compared to other games, which is good. Considering the amount which reported, we had an online reporting system, so literally everything got reported, which was really good. At the moment, with what's come in and what's been followed up on, has has been significantly less than other games.
And, that sounds like it was a very good event. I'm quickly going to just put a poll up that we do. Normally we do it between the question and answer section. We sort of blended it all in to the whole thing. So we'll continue talking after I post it out anyway, just so that it's up. I mean, I'm sure more questions come through, and honestly, I can easily fill up the rest of this time with my own questions because I always have plenty. Not from my perspective, since I work as a turnkey supplier. Effectively, that's the company I work for, and we act as principal contractor and designer. So I see it from the other side. I mean, so how did you ensure that the turnkey providers that you're working with were competent? I've always found that to be an interesting one when I work with clients. The different sort of hoops they make us jump through. It seems to vary from client to client to prove our CDM competence. Though I do love to just say, I have a CHAS certificate.
Yeah, it's a similar process, to be honest. I mean, the tendering process was on, previous events worked on, size of events worked on, accident data, and then membership of key bodies, for example, like CHAS, etc. And then we also had references. So we went to the organisations who they'd done work for and asked for references. Now, needless to say, because of the industry we're in and also the type of event we were running, we knew there were not going to be many bidders for the games, because mainly because the number of structures which we needed in place. There was literally worldwide, you were limited to a handful of different organisations who were bid. The two who won the bids, to be honest, if you look them up and you see the events they're involved in and you see where they're involved in around the world, needless to say, they're the two who you knew were probably going to be up there at the top. Yes, we still put them through the process, you know, the financial checks, background checks, accident checks, etc., to make sure they could comply. Then also we went through supply risk as well. Needs to say, since Brexit, there are some significant complexities around putting the games on with supply materials. Some stuff had to be built bespokely for us. We also had a significant amount of structures which were out in Japan from the Olympics, which were put on with these turnkeys, which then needed bringing back over so we could actually use them here. And then some of those are going down, they're going out to the Middle East, out to the World Cup. So we need to make sure that those supply chains were effective and robust enough to supply the materials which we wanted right from the offset, to ensure that if they're saying they can do it, they can do it. And that's was part of that process, is making sure they had that sort of kudos from previous events to say yes, they can do what they need to do. And that's really how that tender sort of worked. So it's in effect, you know, similar to a normal turnkey tender, but we almost knew who was going to come forward, and then it'd be, can they actually meet the requirements as to what we wanted them to actually meet.
I guess that does make it much easier for you when you know there's only a limited amount of supply turnkey providers that could even manage. We couldn't do it. If you came to us and I suppose you could jump in, well, like, nah, we're not even going to try. We wouldn't be able to manage it.
Yeah. So when you especially when you turn to seating, temporary seating, if you turn around and say, well, we need, you know, 360,000 seats for you to build. Can you put 360,000 seats in? And we need to make sure those turnkeys could fit that amount of seats. So there was all the seats which went in at Sandwell Aquatics. So the aquatic centre is being turned into a leisure centre. So all the seating you saw on the TV, or if you went there, was all temporary seating. It was all seating we put in. And then obviously Alexander Stadium, we put in seating to take it up to 40,000. Whole of the basketball courts, the beach volleyball courts, all temporary seating. So literally every venue you went to, when you started looking at the seating, every single piece we virtually put into place. The only place we didn't put any additional seating was the velodrome, where it was purpose built for the 2012 Olympics. But everything else we did have to repurpose and put everything into place. So that sort of kudos and that process on the tenure for those turnkeys was quite rigorous as to, can you meet this? Have you got supplies in the UK? If you haven't got supplies, how quick can it come in? If you haven't got those supplies, how quick can you manufacture? Do you have the ability to manufacture, etc. as well? And the same also went to our look and wrap people, who did all the nice stuff, all the branding you saw, and also down to our temporary power supplies as well, to make sure they had enough generators, enough cable, etc. in the country to supply every single venue with the power we needed, but also to give us triple backup, which is required by the Green Guide, that if the mains go down, the generator goes down, we have a tertiary supply to power the whole of that venue as well for at least 30 minutes. So we had to make sure there was some significant robustness in those processes for those suppliers as well. Yeah.
We had a question coming in here from Dominic. As Principal CDM Safety Manager for the Olympic Delivery Authority Transport Team in 2012, I'm sure was a lot of fun as well. One issue they came across was that certain PCs not being overly welcoming when they turned up to visit and respect their sites, and if you had any issues with the principal contract. So turnkey fit out providers, same difference.
If I'm being completely honest, Dom, no, we didn't. I think it's because the working relationship we had with the turnkey suppliers. I met with them every week. So I met with the directors every single week. We met with their site managers on a regular basis, and then their safety advisors, which they brought in. We met with those every single week as well. So the relationship with the turnkey suppliers and their safety teams and the directors was very, very good. It's a really good working relationship, and it meant that we could turn up on sites to go and look, and we always had that ethos, especially within the safety team, is we're not going to give 48 hours notice to go to venue, and that our venues, we're making sure that health and safety is being complied with. We may just turn up. What we did sometimes do is just drop the safety team directors just a message to say, we're looking at going these sites this next week, so we may turn up, we may not. If we turn up, you're not surprised. And it just gave a little bit of a heads up, so they knew we were coming. Other FAs within, if they didn't give notes and they turned up, some of them were turned away and they're quite annoyed. But as we said, you haven't followed process. There's a form there you need to fill in to say you are going to visit that site. Just give them some notice, because they then can accommodate you and show you around and answer the questions which you want answering, and they'll make sure they've got the right people on site depending on what FA you're from and what you want to ask. So fortunately, Dom, yeah, we were lucky. We were lucky at this one. People were quite welcome to us.
I mean, I think it was great as well. I loved when I talked to you that you started talking about turnkey, turnkey fit out providers and things like that. There is a slight difference between them and working with principal contractors, because they are literally, by the definition of their company, saying we will do it all. You don't need to find the different people and contract lots of different people in. You can find you tend to work in partnerships instead of, this is a one-time deal. We tend to work with clients that we're going to be with for the next 10, 20 years, constant projects and work going on, and you get to know each other, and the directors will be speaking to each other, and the safety teams know each other by first name, and it becomes a bit much more of a better relationship than just saying, oh, we've hired on a principal contractor, but we'll make them tender for the next 5 jobs, the next 10 jobs, and every little thing will be like that. You're like, well, look, you're tendering for the whole of the Commonwealth Games from, well, turnkey, from the very beginning all the way to the very end.
Yeah, and you're right, Kev. It just makes those relationships so much easier, and everyone knows where they sit, because they're not being tendered for different aspects. And it is that almost, one size fits all, isn't it? In aspect, in the fact, you're going to go to them and say, we have a problem with this. How is that dealt with? And it's going to be followed up. You can get those responses. So definitely for that sort of work, going to a turnkey helps negate a whole host of issues right from the offset. And going back to what I said already, making sure you've got good relationships with people is vital, because if you've got good relationships, when you ask a question, you know you're going to get some help back, or they're going to give you an answer which you want back, and it's not a battle. Because the last thing you want in something like this is that battle and people not getting on. So it takes a bit of give from both sides, and it takes a bit of take from both sides, but you've got to find that happy medium where everyone works together quite nicely.
Fine, I'll share back the slide deck that we had originally. I put the poll out. The information just sort of gets sent through to IOSH centrally, but it looked all right. And then we can go into. There we go. And it's just as we close out, a reminder for the feedback survey. This link will, I'm 99% sure, this link will get sent out to all the attendees as well. But it's here on the screen as well, if anyone wants to remember where that is. And you can also contact us if you're interested in supporting any upcoming events or working with the committee at chiltern@iosh.com. I think I'll just leave that open as we close things out. I mean, I've got nowhere to be. But I'm sure other people have got things going on. I just came off the back of a very intense ISO 45001 certification audit, so I'm taking today to relax and just catch up on a few emails and things. I'm not doing anything major. But people can come off of mute if they want to talk, not even whether it's to Ben or to talk to Chiltern IOSH branch members, and just and then people can sort of peter off as the event comes to an end.
I think you just touched on the ISO, Kevin. I think it's something we initially looked at for the Commonwealth Games, is if we'd had time, we did have sufficient process in place to apply for ISO 45000, which I think would have been a nice legacy to carry forward to the next games, that they've got a standard they need to meet for safety. Unfortunately, all of our times just got swallowed up in the the games itself, and it's something we didn't get to finish or do. So it's something which is going to go into the legacy report of to go forward to the next one down in Melbourne in Australia. Is if you get a chance, maybe ISO 45000 might be a nice thing to do. So we set that standard going forward for other games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a bit biased. I've been working with ISOs for almost a decade, and I've always been a big fan of them. And typically, many companies don't certify themselves to them if there's no commercial benefit to it. There's massive commercial benefit to our business for it. But even I've seen a lot of companies that their things are having a lot of challenges with their management system, and I'm sort of saying, like, literally just take a few of the key people, put them on an ISO 45001 implementation course. The course of BSI is about $2,000 in a couple of days, and it really gives you the tools and the knowledge to be able to actually work to this standard, even if you never get certified, just because it is such a great system to work with. It's very open. It's just a framework really to globally how they've sort of decided the best way to work these things are.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think you hit the nail on the head. That openness, especially at the games, in the fact, is in effect it's a public body, an arm's length government department in effect, run as a government project, and that information and how it's shared, we have to be open in effect, and it's put together so it is simple in its necessity, to be honest, so people can access that information, they can see where it is, and especially with other members within the OC as well, when we're working, where do we get these policies, how does it work, oh, that makes sense. And to be honest, yeah, we set it up as ISO 45001 right from the start. So our health and safety management system right from the start as a 45000 system. It's just we just ran out of time. We just didn't get time.
I don't unfortunately I don't get to have that option. It tends to be a large part, that and SSIPs and CHAS and all the other things that I need to get done, which is fine. I enjoy doing them, so I love getting them done.
Yeah,
it seems like you had a great time with the Commonwealth Games, and I assume it's a constant cycle that goes round and round, and there'll be new things going on.
Yeah, I mean, Australia's already started preparing. those colleagues in the office who work for Commonwealth Games Federation. So there are some people who are actually employed by Commonwealth Games. They're just getting ready to start shutting out here to move out to Australia, ready to start work for the next 3.5 years on that project. So yeah, it's already starting. People are already starting thinking about 2030, because it's more than likely going to be in Hamilton in Canada. That's where it started 100 years ago. That's probably where it will go back to for the centenary. And there's already work started on that already. So most of these sort of events have a 7-year run up. Birmingham was slightly different because we only had 4 years. Australia's even different because they've only got 3.5, because it's taking place at the end of March, just before it hits their winter out there, and a similar time to here now, but March in 2026. Yeah.
But I imagine I have to imagine this. Maybe you turn around and say to me, you did all this all manually, would be impressive. But I imagine you use a lot of digital systems to be able to manage something of this size. I think once you get to the size of the Commonwealth Games, it's like if you have a piece of paper that needs to go through by hand to one person there, you might as well just burn the paper because it's useless.
Yeah, I mean, ours is we a massive amount on SharePoint and shared working documents. I mean, I've got a notebook because I've wrote some little notes for stuff I'll put on some slides and give some extra notes, which as we've discussed. But that's pretty much all I ever write. Anything else in that sort of organisation is digital. It's all electronic, shared spreadsheets, shared Word documents. It is just shared between everyone, so anyone who's key can make comments on those documents. Because of the amount of people dealing with. When you think, when we got to games time, by the time we had all the full-time members of staff, the contractors, the volunteers, there was 65,000 of us in total for those 11 days of sport. And then literally we're down to about 200 people now.
It's been, I can't even imagine the difficulties. I don't think I could work in events. I don't think that's my cup of tea. It sounds very, very interesting, but I don't know. I do love standardizations and.
Yeah, so some people cope with it, some people don't. I will admit we have members of staff join teams who may have got 2-3 months down the line and suddenly went, this is not for me. And this sort of events world, it does suit some people, it doesn't suit others. Games time, there was times where we did 18-hour days, sometimes 20. Wasn't really out of choice. It was slightly against what we should have been doing, but if you need things to work and happen, then sometimes that had to happen. You just rest and recuperate on your days off, because you do have days off, and you make the most of those times. And that's the important thing. But sometimes when you get stuck in certain roles, you don't switch off because you're constantly got challenges coming in which you need to create an answer for there and then, because you know you've got people going onto venues or athletes trying to get to venues which you need to sort out and deal with there, and then you can't put it off to I'll deal with that tomorrow. It has to be done there and then. Sometimes you are working at 100 miles an hour constantly. I know some people say, you know, that there was a day where I turned out 4 policies in a day. I needed 4 policies done. They weren't there. They needed writing. They need going out. They need reviewing. We had 18 hours to get them done. So you write the policies, you get them reviewed, you get them checked, you get them signed off. They're out in the public domain. That's it. You don't have any option. You can't sit there and think, well, what am I going to put into this policy? I'll take a week to do it. You've got to really.
There was no review panel and change management process.
There was all that in place, but we just need to make sure that everyone sped that process up to get it out in 18 hours. And that's sometimes what you're up against to make those decisions and changes. And that's what we sign up for. And that's part of what I love about this sort of industry. It's sometimes the adrenaline, the speed of how things work, and it's got to be right. You can't rush an item because if it's wrong, it's going to go wrong very, very quickly. So you have to make sure what you put in it is right, and it is reviewed and it's gone out, but it is correct in what you're putting out as well. But it's the speed and the rate which things move at, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, I like to use the word agility, but that's not me. Everyone's using that word now. You know, agile processes and agile systems, and making sure things can move quickly and they can change and adapt quickly. And that's the one thing I do love. I mean, it sounds very similar to typically a normal day in the office is for me. Sometimes I do get those quieter days, but yeah, mostly it's short time frames. It is, oh, right, brilliant. We're going to get this piece of work done. We need all these documents. They all need to be reviewed. All this stuff needs to happen. And it's like, okay, when did we get the documents? You know, 24 hours sometimes before boots are on the ground. And it's like, okay, can you achieve all of this? And yeah, you could turn around and I've seen people do it, saying, no, it can't be achieved. You're going to have to delay the project a week while we get all this stuff. And sometimes it does happen. We've had things happen where we're like, no, where structural engineer needs to be involved. And we're going to have to find one and get them on site and then get the report and then get them to go away. You know, you could be spending weeks, but that's, you know, that's somebody's fault for not considering that earlier. And yeah, that happens. Like, crap, I'm just going to drop everything and spend the next 24 hours getting everything done so that we can make sure that when Monday, or working over the weekend, because we know Monday people are turning up to put a scaffolding up, or you know.
I think if everyone wants to see something which works that quickly was if any of you watched the opening ceremony on TV, go if you haven't, go on iPlayer and watch the opening ceremony, see the complexity of the opening ceremony in Alexander Stadium, and then think everything which was gone in there, which took 3 months to build, we stripped out in 72 hours and turned back into a stadium ready for athletes at 72 hours later. Same as the closing ceremony, we finished our last games, and less than 24 hours later, we had our closing ceremony in there. So when you think of the process and how we manage that and how it's safely run as well, yeah, sometimes that speed of turnaround, you've just got to deal with those challenges in front of you to make sure you can deliver what you're being asked to deliver.
Yeah, that's it. As people like to say, and I like to say all the time, you know, health and safety professionals are not here to be a barrier to work being done. We're here to enable work to be done safely. I also don't think that's mine. I just regurgitate cool things.
It's very true, though. Definitely enablers and not restrictors.
That's it. I mean, I'll probably start closing things down. I think most people have left. There's a few people still on. Charles is very engaged. But everyone else is there. The monitors are off, and here. So I'm going to assume that the majority of people have left now. And I don't know if anyone managed to get lunch beforehand, but I literally ran into this meeting, so I'm going to go grab some food. It was great speaking to you, Ben.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for inviting me.
In touch. And I think everyone was very interested in hearing about a much more unique and different way of seeing how CDM, you know, practically functions, not just going through the legislation, which honestly we can all do with a quick Google. And there's a couple of really cool websites I love to use. It's Building Wiki. I'm trying to remember the name of the website. My favorite website for CDM related things. It's really great to be able to hear a practical version of events and how things are going.
Yeah, so I'll send some notes out with some slides and some diagrams just to explain some of those processes and how it works at the games, just to give people an idea of some of the complexity and a bit more visualization as well.
Yeah, we can attach that to a post on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure to @ you in it so you know it's there.
Cool. Excellent. Brilliant.
Right.